I work with women on breaking patterns at the root, and I can tell you, not feeling good enough doesn't always look the way you'd expect it to. When I say someone struggles with worthiness, I'll bet you imagine someone who's constantly doubting themselves, can't make decisions, and looks visibly insecure. But sometimes this can look the exact opposite. It's the woman with the successful career who everyone relies on, who never asks for help, and who you see as capable and strong. And because she looks confident on the outside, nobody sees what's actually going on underneath. So today we're going to talk about why some of the most accomplished women still don't feel good enough, why achievement doesn't create fulfillment, and this is the one nobody talks about. Why the very things you use to feel valuable can end up being exactly what's keeping you stuck. Let's get started. One of the reasons this pattern is so difficult to recognize is because most people are looking for the wrong signs. We think that if someone's struggling with self-esteem, it'll be obvious. But from what I've seen, more often than not, is that many women respond in exactly the opposite way. Instead of giving up, we take on more, we push harder, we achieve, and we become exceptionally good at life. And that's actually why this pattern is so difficult to spot. Because from the outside, this can look like confidence. But confidence and feeling good enough aren't the same thing, and that's an important distinction. Confidence is often built around what you can do, whereas feeling good enough is built around what you believe about yourself when you're not doing anything at all. And those two things don't always develop together. I've worked with women who can walk into a boardroom full of executives and confidently deliver a presentation to hundreds of people, yet still struggle to ask for what they need in a relationship. Women who can manage teams, businesses, households, and entire organizations, yet they feel guilty spending money on themselves. Women who are admired by everyone around them, yet privately they feel as though they're one mistake away from being exposed as not good enough. And if any of this sounds familiar, I want you to understand, this isn't a sign of failure. If anything, it means you've become very good at adapting. You just adapted around a belief that was never true in the first place. Because if somewhere in your life you learned that love, approval, recognition, or safety had to be earned, then achievement becomes a very logical strategy. The problem is that achievement can only ever temporarily satisfy a feeling that was never created by a lack of achievement in the first place. And this is where things start to get interesting. Because if success isn't solving the problem, we need to start asking a different question. What exactly is it that you're trying to prove? I remember experiencing this myself when I left my career in finance. At the time, I felt it was the right decision. I just had my first child, and after years of balancing demanding roles, conference calls at all hours, and the constant pressure that comes with climbing the corporate ladder, I wanted to spend more time with my family. At first, I felt relieved. The pace slowed down, and I was more present at home. And for a while, I really enjoyed stepping away from the constant demands and expectations that I was so used to. But what I didn't realize was how much of my identity had become tied to my career. For years, if someone asked me who I was, a large part of my answer would have been connected to my job title, my achievements, my responsibilities, and in my head, the income I earned. Because without realizing it, I had attached my sense of value to what I did. And when that was suddenly gone, I found myself asking questions I never expected to ask. Questions like, who am I if I'm not doing that job anymore? What am I actually contributing? What am I worth if I'm no longer earning the salary I once earned? Although my skills and my experience hadn't disappeared, what disappeared was what I had unknowingly been using as evidence of my self-worth. And that's when I started to understand something that I think affects many accomplished women. Achievement can become much more than a goal. It can become a way of proving that we're enough. And of course, we're not doing this consciously. Most people aren't walking around thinking, if I achieve this, then I'll finally be worthy. But underneath the surface, that can be exactly what's happening. And this is because many of us received praise when we achieved. Think about it. What was the reaction when you got good grades, when you worked hard, when you acted responsibly, and when you succeeded? And once that belief takes root, it doesn't just disappear when you become an adult. It simply finds a different way of expressing itself. The good student becomes the high achiever. The high achiever becomes the successful professional. The successful professional becomes the woman who carries everyone else's responsibilities. And no matter how much you accomplish, there's still a voice quietly asking, have I done enough yet? Because your problem was never a lack of achievement. The problem was that achievement was being asked to do a job it was never designed to do. It was being asked to make you feel enough, and no amount of achievement can ever possibly do that. For some women, achievement becomes the strategy. For others, it's being needed. And for many high-functioning women, it's both. When you think about it, there's something deeply satisfying about being the person people can rely on. Being helpful and being capable feel good. Knowing that others trust you and depend on you can create a genuine sense of purpose and value. The challenge is, these qualities can start becoming a part of your identity. You become the fixer, the organizer, the problem solver, the strong one, the person everyone calls on when something goes wrong. And after a while, we don't just help because we want to. We help because not helping feels uncomfortable. Because when your sense of value becomes connected to what you do for other people, helping starts to feel less like a choice and more like who you are. And for some people, being needed feels safer than needing. In fact, I remember saying to someone years ago, would you rather be the needy one or the one who's needed and useful? At the time, I didn't realize how revealing that question was, because hidden within it is a belief. The belief that needing support somehow makes you weaker, while being useful makes you valuable. Looking back, I can see why and how often I chose the role of the helper, the listener, and the supporter. And maybe you've done the same, because you've become so used to being the strong one that asking for help feels uncomfortable and receiving support feels awkward. Or maybe you've convinced yourself that everyone else deserves support, compassion, and understanding, and somehow you should be able to handle everything on your own. I know for me, I've always been the person people come to with their problems, and even people I had just met would feel comfortable opening up to me. And for years, I saw that as a positive thing. But one day, I noticed something interesting. I realized that many of my friends knew very little about what was actually happening in my life. They rarely asked how I was. If I was quiet, nobody checked in. If I was struggling, most people assumed I was fine. And I remember noticing that without feeling upset about it. I didn't think people didn't care. I simply assumed they were just absorbed in their own lives, dealing with their own challenges, and focused on their own priorities. In fact, many of them were far more emotionally expressive than I was. I've always been quite logical and independent, so I wasn't someone who openly talked about my problems or looked for support. But it did make me realize something. People can only respond to the version of you that you show them. And if you spend years presenting yourself as the person who's always fine, always capable, and always handling everything, most people will eventually stop asking. And this isn't because they don't care. It's because you've shown them that you don't need anything from them. Like I said, I'm a very independent and practical person, and I don't think I wanted support as often as some people do. But there's a difference between not needing constant support and unconsciously believing you should never need it at all. And I think many accomplished women find themselves in exactly that position. We become so good at being self-sufficient that receiving starts to feel unfamiliar, and so good at holding everything together that vulnerability starts to feel like weakness. And while being the strong one can feel empowering, it can also become surprisingly isolating, because eventually you can find yourself surrounded by people who appreciate you, but very few who truly know what's happening beneath the surface. The irony is that the very thing many women need at this point is support. Not advice, not another strategy, but support. Yet after years of becoming the giver, receiving support can feel extremely difficult. And that's where the next challenge begins. For a while, being the strong one can feel pretty empowering. You're the person who always seems to have everything under control. People depend on you, and you're the person who can handle whatever life throws at them. And on the surface, there doesn't seem to be a downside. But every identity has a cost. And eventually, even the cost of being the strong one will eventually catch up with you. Underneath it all, resentment can quietly start to build, because a part of you is starting to notice how often you're the one giving your time and energy and your attention, while your own needs move further and further down the priority list. And after a while, people seem to expect it. You find yourself wondering why you're always the one making the effort. And maybe the most frustrating part is that most people don't even know it's happening. Because from their perspective, you're handling it. And because you've always handled it, they assume you're fine. The truth is, you've spent years showing both yourself and everyone else around you that you can manage on your own. And when that's the standard you've set for yourself, even normal human needs can start to feel uncomfortable. Things like needing reassurance, needing support, or needing someone else to step in for a change. And that's where many women find themselves trapped, because the very thing that could help you feel more supported is the one thing you've spent years teaching yourself not to do. You've become so accustomed to being the capable one, the dependable one, and the strong one that receiving starts to feel far more uncomfortable than giving. Because receiving requires something many accomplished women have spent years avoiding, and that's vulnerability. Allowing yourself to be seen, not as the person who always has the answers, but as a human being who sometimes feels uncertain, overwhelmed, or just simply tired. And maybe that's why this pattern becomes so important to understand, because it doesn't just affect how you feel about yourself. It eventually starts influencing the relationships you create and the relationships you choose. This pattern rarely stays confined to your career, your responsibilities, or the way you show up for other people. Eventually, it starts showing up in your relationships as well. And often, we don't recognize it because it doesn't look the way we'd expect. We don't consciously think, I need to earn love. But sometimes your behavior might be telling a different story. For example, have you ever found yourself putting more effort into a relationship than the other person? Like making excuses for someone else's behavior, or giving chance after chance after chance because you can see the potential in someone. Or even finding yourself constantly trying to prove your value rather than simply experiencing the relationship. I remember years ago hearing someone say that people don't get what they deserve, they get what they tolerate. And at the time, I wasn't sure how I felt about that statement. But over the years, I've realized there is some truth in it, because what we believe about ourselves influences what we accept from other people. If deep down you don't fully recognize your own value, you'll often settle for less than you deserve without even realizing you're doing it. And this doesn't mean you're weak or even desperate, but because a part of you still believes love, appreciation, and acceptance need to be earned. And when that's the belief, relationships can become exhausting. You find yourself doing more, giving more, trying harder, being more understanding and more patient than you probably should be, hoping that eventually they'll meet you where you are. But healthy relationships don't require you to constantly prove your value. They don't require you to earn basic respect. And they don't require you to endlessly convince someone you're worthy of being loved, appreciated, or chosen. Of course, people appreciate what we bring to a relationship. They appreciate our kindness, our support, our humor, our time, and our presence. But healthy relationships are built on mutual appreciation, not earned worthiness. In other words, your value doesn't disappear the moment you stop performing. It doesn't disappear because you're going through a difficult moment. It doesn't disappear because you're struggling. And it doesn't disappear because, for once, you're the one who needs support. And this is where many accomplished women find themselves facing a difficult question. If I stopped proving, performing, and overgiving tomorrow, would I still feel valuable? Because until that question is answered, the pattern often continues. And this will show up in different relationships, different circumstances, and with different people. But the same underlying belief remains. And that's why understanding the pattern is important. But here's the catch. Understanding alone isn't always enough, because many of these beliefs don't just live in the mind. They also live at an emotional and energetic level. And unless we address that deeper layer, understanding the pattern alone will rarely create lasting change. By this point, you may be starting to recognize yourself in some of these patterns. Like, you may have realized that achievement became a way of feeling valuable, or maybe you've noticed how often you found yourself in the role of the giver, the fixer, or the strong one. And for many people, that awareness can be incredibly powerful because you can't change something you can't see. But one of the things I've noticed over the years, both in my own life and when working with others, is that awareness doesn't automatically create change. In fact, some of the most self-aware people I know are still struggling with the same patterns they've been trying to overcome for years. They understand why they overthink. They understand why they people please. They understand why they keep ending up in the same types of relationships. They even understand why they don't feel good enough. And yet the pattern continues, which raises another question. If awareness is the answer, why do so many people remain stuck long after they've become aware of the problem? I often think about it like a weed in a garden. Imagine you discover a weed growing in your garden and finally understand where it's coming from. You understand how it got there. You understand what allowed it to grow. You might even understand exactly why it keeps coming back. But understanding the weed doesn't remove it. The roots are still there. And unless something changes at the root level, the weed simply continues growing. I think many emotional patterns work in exactly the same way. Understanding why you don't feel good enough, why you overgive, or why you constantly seek approval, all of that can be genuinely helpful. But understanding a pattern and healing a pattern are not the same thing. Because many of these patterns survive for years, not because we don't understand them, but because we've unknowingly built our identity around them. They've become part of how we see ourselves, part of how we navigate the world, and part of how we determine whether we're succeeding or failing. And that's where things can become surprisingly difficult, because before we can change the pattern, we need to first understand what we've been using the pattern for. Before we go any further, I want to clarify something. This isn't about being passive or pretending we don't live in a world where effort matters. Of course, there are transactional parts of life. We work and receive a salary. We develop skills and earn opportunities. We build businesses, contribute to our communities, and we bring value to our relationships. That's part of being human. The goal isn't to stop achieving, and it's certainly not about expecting life to hand us everything without effort. The distinction I'm making is much deeper than that, because there's a difference between earning trust and believing you have to earn your worth. In fact, maybe you can relate to this, because I know I can. Imagine you're at work. You're always showing up early, staying late, and working hard. You go above and beyond what's expected. Then one day, you need to leave an hour early, and the reason why isn't at all relevant. And even though you've spent months or even years proving yourself, you can't help but think, what will people say? Will they think I'm not committed? Am I letting anyone down? Logically, you know you've earned the right to leave early. But emotionally, it can still feel uncomfortable because somewhere in your past, you learned to associate your value with your performance. And I think many accomplished women unknowingly blur those lines. You become so accustomed to earning results that you start applying the same logic to yourself without even realizing it. Achievement stops being something you do and starts becoming evidence of who you are. And so your success becomes evidence that you're enough. And that's where the trap begins, because no amount of achievement can permanently satisfy a need that achievement was never designed to fulfill. And this is where I believe we need to look beyond mindset alone, Because, as I said, many of these beliefs don't just exist in the mind. They also exist at an emotional and energetic level. Think about it this way. Every significant experience we have leaves an impression. These could be the moments where we felt rejected or criticized, or the moments where we feel unseen, unsupported, or not good enough. So maybe you decided that being successful was the safest way to feel valued, or that being strong was the safest way to avoid disappointment. At the time, those decisions often make perfect sense. The problem is that many of those decisions continue operating long after the original situation has disappeared. What started as a coping strategy slowly becomes a pattern, and eventually the pattern starts running automatically. It's not like you have to consciously tell yourself to prove your value, or to help everyone, or to stay strong. You just do it without even thinking. And when you don't, something doesn't feel right, or you feel guilty, or uncomfortable, or like somehow you've let yourself down. This is one of the reasons I find energetic healing so valuable. Because while understanding the story is important, healing also requires us to address the emotional charge that sits underneath the story. This helps to clear the fear, the shame, the guilt, and the emotional residue that keeps pulling us back into the same patterns. And when that emotional charge begins to dissolve, something incredible starts to happen. The behavior often starts changing naturally, and it's not because you're forcing yourself to think differently. It's because the emotional driver underneath the behavior is no longer as strong, which means that the need to prove yourself begins to weaken, and the need to constantly be the strong one begins to fade. And maybe for the first time, you begin experiencing what it feels like to simply be yourself, without achieving, without being useful, or needing to prove anything. And that's where real freedom begins. Not when life changes, not when other people change, but when the beliefs and emotional patterns that have been quietly running your life are finally dissolved at the root. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this video, it's that feeling good enough was never supposed to come from constantly proving yourself. For many high-achieving women, success, achievement, and being useful become the measures of your worth. And before long, life can start to feel like an endless series of tests that must be passed before you're finally allowed to relax, to feel secure, or to feel valuable. The problem is that the finish line keeps moving. Every achievement creates the expectation of another achievement, and every milestone becomes the starting point for the next one. And eventually, you can find yourself exhausted from chasing a feeling that never seems to last, because the problem was never a lack of achievement. The problem was expecting achievement to answer a question it was never meant to answer. Am I enough? And no promotion, relationship, qualification, or accomplishment can ever permanently answer that question for you. And while there's nothing wrong with succeeding, the issue is not what you're doing, but the meaning you've attached to it. Because when your sense of value becomes dependent on performance, life becomes a constant exercise in proving something that should never have needed to be proven in the first place. Real change begins when we stop asking achievement to create self-esteem and start looking at the beliefs that convinced us it was necessary. The goal isn't to become less successful, to care less, or to stop contributing. The goal is to build a relationship with yourself that isn't dependent on what you've achieved, because when that happens, something begins to shift. Success becomes something you enjoy rather than something you need. Helping becomes a choice rather than an identity. And achievement stops being proof of your value and starts being an expression of it. Now, if any part of this video resonated with you, take a moment and ask yourself this: where in my life am I still trying to earn something that can't be earned? Because sometimes the greatest transformation doesn't come from becoming more. Sometimes it comes from releasing the belief that you were ever lacking it in the first place. And that's where feeling enough truly begins. So if you're ready to go deeper into this work and start uncovering the beliefs, emotional patterns, and energetic blocks that may still be influencing your life, I'd love to invite you to join Evolve. Evolve is my one-to-one 7-week program designed to help you move beyond awareness and into real transformation by working with the emotional, energetic, and subconscious patterns that keep you stuck in the same cycles. We don't just talk about the pattern. we dissolve it at the root, energetically and emotionally, so it stops running your life. So if you'd like to learn more, the link is in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, take care, stop earning what was never meant to be earned, and always stay inspired.